The year is approximately 1400 BC. The location is the Jordan Valley, the lowest point on the face of the earth. The air is thick, humid, and oppressive. Standing between the wandering tribes of Israel and the destiny they had been promised for centuries was a monster. It was not a beast of flesh and blood, but a beast of stone, Jericho. Jericho was not just a city, it was a lock on the door to the Promised Land. It was the oldest fortified city in existence. To the nomadic Israelites who had lived in tents for 40 years, eating manna and drinking from rocks, Jericho must have looked like a mountain carved by the gods. It sat on a mound surrounded by a double ring of defensive walls that were considered impenetrable. The outer wall had a stone retaining base 15 feet high, with a mud brick wall rising another 25 feet on top of that. Behind it, a steep slope plastered with slippery clay led to an inner wall even taller and thicker. Inside those walls lived the Canaanites, a warrior culture known for their brutality, their iron chariots, and their dark religious rituals involving child sacrifice. They were terrified of the Israelites, not because of their weapons, but because of their reputation. They had heard about the Red Sea. They had heard about the kings of the East who had been slaughtered. So Jericho did what it did best. It shut its gates. The Bible says Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. It was a stalemate, a siege against a city that could not be breached, by an army that had no siege engines, no catapults, and no ladders. But the Battle of Jericho would not be fought with battering rams. It would be fought with frequency, vibration, and the terrifying sound of obedience. This is the story of how the impossible became dust.
Before the first stone fell, the leadership had to change. Moses, the great lawgiver, was dead. The mantle now rested on the shoulders of Joshua. Joshua was a warrior, a general, a man of action. As he surveyed the massive walls of Jericho, likely strategizing a point of attack, he realized he was not alone. Standing opposite him was a man, but this was no ordinary man. He stood with a drawn sword in his hand, a universal sign of aggression. In the ancient world, if you see a stranger with a drawn sword near a war zone, you assume he is an assassin. Joshua, showing the courage that defined him, marched up to the stranger and asked the question every soldier asks: "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" It is a binary question: friend or foe, ally or enemy. The stranger's answer shattered Joshua's paradigm. No. Some translations say neither. But as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. Joshua realized instantly who he was facing. This was not a human ally. This was not an angel. This was a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of God himself in the form of a warrior. Joshua did not salute. He fell on his face. "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." The message was clear. This was not Joshua's war. This was not Israel's war. This was God's war. Jericho was not just a military obstacle. It was a spiritual stronghold that had to be judged. The strategy that followed would prove that no human hand could claim the glory.
If Joshua had presented the battle plan to a modern military council, he would have been relieved of command for insanity. God's instructions were specific and baffling. "You shall march around the city, all the men of war, going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days." 7 priests were to bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Covenant. On the seventh day, they were to march around 7 times, blow the horns, and the people were to shout. No arrows, no spears, no climbing, just walking. Imagine the confusion among the soldiers. These were men ready to fight, blood pumping, swords sharpened, and they were told to parade, to walk in circles. It went against every instinct of self-preservation. To walk within range of the enemy archers on the walls without returning fire was suicide. But the centerpiece of this procession was not the soldiers. It was the box, the Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated acacia chest that contained the 10 Commandments. It was the literal footstool of God on earth. By placing the Ark in the battle, God was saying, "I am the battering ram."
The first day of the siege began. The sun rose over the mountains of Moab, casting long shadows over the palm trees of Jericho. The gates of Jericho remained sealed. The king of Jericho and his sentries watched from the high towers, expecting a charge. They expected ladders, grappling hooks, fire. Instead, they saw a bizarre column emerging from the Israelite camp. First, the armed guard, the elite soldiers walking in formation. Then, 7 priests, dressed in white linen, holding curved shofars, ram's horns. Then the ark, shimmering in the sun, carried on the shoulders of the Levites. Finally, the rear guard. And the noise, or rather, the lack of it. God had given a specific command regarding sound. "You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout." Imagine the eerie, psychological terror of this. A massive army of thousands marching in perfect unison, and not a single human voice speaking. No taunts, no war cries, no commands. Just the rhythmic, heavy thud of thousands of boots hitting the dust. Thump, thump, thump. And the piercing, haunting blast of the shofars. Ti, ki, ah. For the people inside Jericho, this must have been maddening. They watched the enemy circle their city once. They waited for the attack. They waited for the arrows, but the Israelites just finished the lap and went back to camp. Day 2, the same thing. The silence, the horns, the walking. Day 3, day 4. By the 5th and 6th day, the fear inside Jericho would have curdled into a strange mixture of confusion and dread. Was this a ritual? A curse? Were they mocking them? The psychological weight of the silence was heavier than any stone. The Israelites were demonstrating supreme discipline. They were demonstrating that they didn't need to try hard. They were just waiting. The silence was the sound of impending doom.
Amidst this silent terror, there was one window in the wall that was different. In a house built directly into the city wall lived a woman named Rahab. She was a prostitute, a woman on the margins of society. But weeks earlier, she had hidden 2 Israelite spies. She had made a deal. She had confessed a faith that the king of Jericho did not have. "For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." She was told to tie a scarlet cord in her window, a bright red rope hanging against the gray, dusty stone. As the army marched around the city day after day, Rahab must have gathered her family into that room, her father, her mother, her brothers. That room was the only safe place in a doomed city. That red cord was the blood of the Passover lamb. It was the line between life and death. While the rest of the city trembled in fear of judgment, Rahab trembled in the hope of salvation. She could hear the footsteps getting louder each day. She knew the end was coming. The 7th day dawned, the number 7, the number of divine completion. On this day, the routine changed.
They did not go back to camp after one lap. They kept walking. Lap 2, the sun climbed higher. Lap 3, the dust rose, choking the air. Lap 4, the exhaustion set in, sweat pouring down the soldiers' faces, but the discipline held. Lap 5, the tension inside the city must have been at a breaking point. Why aren't they stopping? Lap 6. Lap 7. The procession stopped. The silence in the valley was absolute, a stillness that felt like the air before a tornado. The priests raised the shofars to their lips. They took a deep breath. Joshua's voice, the first human voice heard in 7 days, cut through the air like a blade. "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city."
The sound that followed was unlike anything the ancient world had ever heard. The blast of the trumpets mixed with the roar of tens of thousands of human throats screaming in unison. It was a sonic weapon of worship and war. And then, the physics of the world broke. The Bible says, the wall fell down flat. Archaeologists who have excavated the site, Tel Es Sultan, have found evidence that suggests a massive tectonic event. The mud brick walls didn't just crumble, they collapsed outward and downward. The debris from the tall walls fell into the ditch at the bottom, creating a perfect ramp for the soldiers. The earth shook. The roar of cracking stone drowned out the screams. The dust cloud would have been blinding. The impregnable defenses of Jericho, built over centuries, were liquidated in seconds. Everything collapsed, except for one section. One small part of the north wall remained standing, the section with the red cord in the window. The order that followed is one of the darkest and most difficult in the Bible. It was the order of Herem, the ban. The city was to be devoted to destruction. This was not a looting spree. This was a divine execution. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. The soldiers charged up the ramps of debris. The Canaanites, disoriented, choked by dust and terrified by their godless walls collapsing, were slaughtered. Why such total destruction? Because Jericho was the firstfruits. It was a cancer of idolatry and child sacrifice that had to be cut out completely to prevent it from infecting the new nation of Israel. The gold and silver were not to be taken by soldiers. They went into the treasury of the Lord. Jericho was a burnt offering. The city was set on fire. The smoke of the burning city rose into the sky, a black pillar visible for miles. It was a signal to all the kings of Canaan. The God of Israel has arrived, and he does not play by the rules of men. Rahab and her family were brought out. They were the only survivors. A prostitute became a princess of the faith, eventually becoming the great-great-grandmother of King David and an ancestor of Jesus Christ. The dust settled. The screams faded. Jericho was a smoking ruin of ash and stone. Joshua stood over the destruction and pronounced a curse that would echo through history. "Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." The city was to remain a heap of ruins, a monument to the power of God. Centuries later, a man named Heel of Bethel would try to rebuild it, and he would lose his 2 sons exactly as the curse predicted. The fall of Jericho stands as a stark reminder that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. From a human perspective, the plan was foolish. Walking in circles solves nothing. Shouting at stones achieves nothing. But the battle was never about the walls.
It was about the faith to look foolish in the eyes of the world in order to be obedient to the voice of God. The walls of Jericho did not fall because the Israelites pushed them. They fell because the Israelites stopped trying to fight in their own strength and allowed God to be the commander. Whatever wall stands in front of you today, immovable, imposing, impossible, remember the dust of Jericho. It didn't take an army to bring it down. It just took a shout. Thank you for watching Biblical Sagas. If you want to explore more ancient mysteries and divine battles, subscribe and join us next time. The history is deep, and the truth is sharper than any two-edged sword.